African leaders have announced the launch of an innovative method of curbing the effects of global warming and climate change in Africa. Termed the African Risk Capacity, the mechanism is expected to issue climate change catastrophe bonds in 2016. These bonds will reportedly provide additional financing to participating countries to enhance their climate adaptation investments in the event of extreme heat, drought, floods, or cyclones across the continent. For more on this, we're now joined on the line from Rome in Italy by Dr. Richard Wilcox, the founding Director General of Africa Risk Capacity. Doctor, a very good morning to you and welcome to AM.
Hey, good morning, Elvis. Thanks for having me.
How did this African Risk Capacity come about? Please tell us about that.
Sure. The African Risk Capacity, we're an organization of the African Union, and what we do is we provide financing for member states. We have 24 African member states at present for natural disasters, and that's based on 30 years of weather data across Africa, on which we issue insurance contracts to those countries. They join the insurance company, become owners of the insurance company, and in the case of a disaster in their country, they receive a payout from us. Now, there's a 30 years of data of the present climate, so the question was, how can we help these countries, our member countries, adapt to if the climate changes? And as you know, the link between greenhouse emissions and global warming is quite clear one, but how did it affect each individual country in terms of having more severe events, more droughts, floods, and cyclones is somewhat uncertain. So what we're doing is we built an index for each country that monitors their extreme events over the past 30 years, and then should the frequency show that there's a change in the climate, and we measure this every 5 years going forward, there would be a payout from this bond to the countries. We go out to the international markets with a bond issue in 2016 that says we will pay you interest. You give us the capital. We'll hold that capital for you, and in the event of a change in the climate, that capital gets paid out to the countries that participate in the scheme. If not, you get it back after 5 years.
So, just to explain, so it's an insurance against catastrophes for Africa.
That is what the African Risk Capacity does, and we have insurance contracts with countries, and now we're adding an additional financial layers for those countries that are currently managing their weather risks through the African Risk Capacity's insurance program to help them finance climate change adaptation should the climate change and make it more difficult for them to provide the kind of protection for their populations from extreme events. That's correct.
Who are the current members, Doctor, to the scheme?
Right now, the African Risk Capacity has 5 member states that have taken out policies for a total of $135 million. That's Mauritania, Senegal, Niger, Mozambique, and Kenya. And they're paid $17 million in premiums for this coverage. They've banded together as a group of countries to pool their risks across the continent. And the reason that makes sense is because, as you know, the weather in Africa is different than the different parts of the continent. The Horn of Africa counter-correlates with Southern Africa. So if you're having a really good agricultural season in Southern Africa, you're probably having a not-so-great season in the Horn. That's the monsoon system. West Africa gets its rains from the Atlantic. That's completely unrelated to the other two main regions. So if countries from those regions pool together, they create a portfolio effect, which means that they need much less funding put together than each would need individually to hold against risks. So these countries, with our help, came together and formed a company called the African Risk Capacity Insurance Company, and have insured each other against these disasters. And now what we're providing, as announced last week in New York at the Climate Summit by our chair, Dr. Ngozi, the chair of our board, Nigeria's finance minister, is a scheme that will help countries have additional funding in the event that the climate on which we've based our insurance company, that's the last 30 years of weather, were to in fact change in the future.
Now, I would like to discuss this further, Doctor, but unfortunately we get a very bad connection there, and I'm sure the listeners can't really, or the viewers can't really hear what you're trying to say. But that was Dr. Richard Wilcox, the Director General of African Risk Capacity, joining us on the line from Italy, on the line there. And as you heard,